Hello, my friend. Before we start this amazing episode, I want to invite you to the personal Patreon page of this podcast. If you love what's being done here and want to keep the podcast and the meditations free to the public, then you can come on over to our brand new community on Patreon and donate $11.11 a month, and all proceeds will go towards keeping this free, keeping this going. Plus, we'll be building a community together, and I'll give you bonus material. You can explore this option in the description of this podcast, or just go to patreon.com/Dr. Reese. Let's begin.
Welcome to Inner Peace with Dr. Reese, a program that can help you become liberated in the modern world. Now, here's your host, Dr. Kevin W. Reese.
So, do you have a puppy mind? Welcome to episode number 126. Today, I'm talking with Andrew Jordan Nance. He's a mindfulness teacher for children and the author of such children's books as Puppy Mind and The Lion in Me. So sit down, relax, and take in this beautiful and important recording. Let's begin. Andrew, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
What's puppy mind?
Puppy mind is that wandering part of our mind that sometimes pulls us into the past and into the future without our permission. It's that daydreaming part of our minds. So, that's what it is.
And there's a book. You wrote a children's book about it.
There's a book called Puppy Mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I chose the term puppy mind, and it's not my expression. I had heard about it from Jack Kornfield, talks about the puppy mind. And I saw it in a curriculum that I read once. And I just liked that concept rather than the term monkey mind, which is a very used Buddhist expression. But I didn't like the idea of chaining a monkey, of controlling a monkey. You know, monkeys are wild animals, but dogs and humans have been in consort together for millennia.
True.
And I just thought that was a little bit kinder and more user-friendly and more relatable than a wild animal.
Yeah. So now you can take the teachings and the message of this children's book, and you can bring it to the classroom because you go around teaching children mindfulness, right?
That's right. That's right. And one of the ways we start this conversation of the puppy mind is I'll say, where does your mind like to daydream about? Or where does your mind like to wander without your permission? What happy place does your mind like to go to? And they all have a response, you know, whether it's their favorite fast food restaurant or their auntie's house or their upcoming birthday party or the great vacation they took over the summer. The list just is endless. And so it really sets the stage for understanding that we all have this mind that likes to wander, and it's our job to just get it to come back to the present, one kind breath at a time. I also like to say that, you know what, we don't want to get rid of our puppy minds. The puppy mind gets us to that amazing vacation that we were on, or gets us to that birthday party, or allows us to think about our favorite food or our favorite video game or whatever. So we don't want that to go away. That's our imagination, basically. It's just we don't want it running the show. And as you know, being human, we think unconscious thoughts all the time. And what I love about mindfulness is it's about waking up a little bit to remember to be conscious, to remember to notice what's happening here and now, rather than living in the past or hoping for some sort of future.
Mm. Yeah, it's about paying attention.
Yeah. With kindness. Sometimes they say without judgment, But you know what? If judgment shows up, then that's okay. We got to be kind to judgment too. So um, that's a really, I think, important part of the equation is with whatever shows up, greet it with kindness, curiosity, and care.
Yeah. So what type of responses and incidents have you seen in the classroom doing puppy mind with the children?
Right. Most of it's been really well received. The kids really like the idea. They get the idea. And in fact, I bring in I'll show you, your audience won't be able to see it, but I bring in this little puppy here. It's a stuffed animal puppy, and he's very cute. And I have a puppeteering background, so I can make it kind of look alive if I wanted to. And I'll have a list in my binder, and it has all the kids' names, and I'll just every week I'll go down the list and I'll give a kid an opportunity to be the puppy sitter. And what I'll say is, all right, I'd like you to hold this puppy, Jonathan, and I want you to just see if you can let him fall asleep in your lap. And if I start to notice that he's up on your shoulder or he's up on your head or you're tossing him back and forth, I know that your puppy mind's taken over. So I might say, oh, Jonathan, careful, take a breath. And then he'll be doing this and be like, oh my goodness, I had no idea I was even throwing the puppy around, because he knows the directions. It's not hard. And he'll just put him back in his lap and he'll begin again. And that's what mindfulness or meditation specifically is noticing when the mind or body wanders, and to come back. We've all probably been, or whoever meditates out there, sometimes you notice you start playing with your shirt collar or you're itching or whatever. And you're like, oh, look at me itch. I don't need to actually do this for a minute. I could probably stop now. And you come back and you're kind about it. You're not like, hopefully you have an awareness that, it's no big deal. It's just an opportunity to begin again and take a breath.
Yeah. So important to teach children this and show them this, because I was just telling someone this the other day that, man, if somebody could have just pulled me over to the side when I was younger and said, hey, your thoughts aren't real. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been a game changer right there.
Yeah.
Because that's the reality, isn't it? That we're just projecting imagination.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're not required. They're not required reading. Just because you're having a thought doesn't mean you have to act on it or hold on to it or follow it. I actually just wrote a manuscript called Thoughts Are Like Itches. And we don't have to scratch every itch or think every thought. And that's also, I think, part of the equation. And so, we just want to notice, oh boy, I am all over the map today, or I'm thinking about that trip tomorrow, or whatever it is, and I can come back. I just need to wake up enough to do it.
When we know that they're not real, it takes the charge off of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right. They're just suggestions.
But if they go negative,
right.
Some people have, the automatic negative thoughts spewing out.
Right.
I would think that's a big cause of the term they call depression.
Yeah. Yeah. You might be right. Yeah. It's not believing everything we think, these thoughts, just like emotions, just kind of float by, and we have to decide whether they're ours to hold or keep. We have to be discerning. I love that concept of thoughts aren't real. And I don't bring it up with the kids because I actually find it a little confusing. Just in my own head, so I wouldn't be able to articulate it probably as well as you could. But
that's probably more of a teaching for a teenager.
Yeah. Yeah, perhaps. I don't know. I've just never worked with those terms before. Just, like I said, it's just, it's just a bubble. It's just this,
Yeah.
just these bubble of thoughts just percolate up, and it's up to us what we grab onto. And in fact, I play this really fun game that anyone can do with kids. Is you get a bottle of bubbles and you say, okay, I'm going to blow bubbles over your head. And you can have like 4 or 5 kids, you would have 1 kid, whatever. And I want you to grab all the bubbles you can, as much as you can. And so I'll do it, and they'll giggle and they'll have fun and whatnot. And I, of course, say, be careful not to hurt anyone or hit anyone. So I'll say, okay, that's what we do with our thoughts all day, every day. We grab the thought bubbles constantly, and it can be exhausting. Now I want you to just be totally still, and I'm going to blow the bubbles like I did before. But this time, I want you to just notice the bubbles as they fall to the floor and disappear, and see what that feels like. What does it feel like to just watch the bubbles go by without having to grab onto every one of them? And they'll say, it felt better. It felt more relaxed. And they're also proud of themselves for being still, even though they have the impulse to grab a bubble. Because that's what we do all the time, don't we? Is we have a thought and we're like, oh yeah, that's true. I do need to plan for that event, or I need to make my lunch, or, whatever it is. We have a thought and we believe it, and we think it's true, and we think it's imperative to act on it in this moment. And we're sort of hijacked by our thoughts all the time, just like we are emotions.
But that's where anxiety comes from.
Yeah. Yeah.
Someone having worrisome thoughts that they're having trouble taking the charge off of it.
That's right. Yeah. And most of the time it's about a future that hasn't happened yet,
Yeah.
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 Yeah. The mind is so interesting because isn't it evolution? Like we've evolved into these critical thinking machines.
Mm-hmm.
And in that sense, it's beautiful. Like we build buildings and make smartphones and can do open heart surgeries. And like, it's pretty impressive what human beings have accomplished. But then at the same time, wow, there's a lot of anxiety and depression out there.
And we forget that we also have this body that also has all this wisdom and knowledge and feeling that we don't really connect to. I think a lot of times we try to talk ourselves out of emotions. If you're anxious, you're like, okay, just calm down. It's not a big deal, whatever. But what if it is a big deal? What if, there's a lot to worry about? And what if we just tended to that worry and tended to that anxiety and the sensations that show up with anxiety? Is the anxiety in the back of my neck? Is it in my hands? Is it in my belly? And just say, yes, of course you're anxious. This thing has happened, or this thing might happen, or you're going through something right now. Of course, just that to turn towards it with kindness, I think might help a lot of people with anxiety. Because, we're not supposed to be happy all the time. That's, imagine, thousands of years ago, cavemen were not happy all the time. Cave people were not happy all the time. They were worried about their next meal and the next thunderstorm or the next snowstorm or the next, saber-toothed tiger or whatever, So it's not, I don't know, they talk about, the sort of the natural peace and ease of the human experience. But yes, that's part of it. But also, we're just the full catastrophe. We have so many different emotions that are pleasant and unpleasant. And I think if we can get comfortable with the unpleasant, we're going to have richer lives. I think I'm not here talking about mindfulness to encourage, happiness all the time. I'm more interested in having people be able to ride the waves with some more skill and care of life than have this flatlined, life that never has any, big emotions or big moments or big thoughts. I want people to just learn how to be skillful with it all.
Yeah. If you become enlightened, you're almost like a psychopath.
What do you mean? Keep going. What do you mean by that?
Oh, I've met enlightened people. There's no roller coaster ride.
Right. Yeah.
So there's no, because their mind is relaxed.
Yeah.
It's they only use it when they need it.
Right.
So there is no anxiety and depression. So that part was good, but
and
they also don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Naturally, because if your mind doesn't work,
right,
what is there to care about?
Right.
So it's interesting. It's like the most peaceful thing ever, but then at the same time, don't rely on that person to come help you, because they're already in their little heaven.
Right. Yeah. For me, it's been, and I'm certainly not enlightened, obviously, but I do find that when life gives you some hard stuff, or gives me hard stuff, I suffer less. I still feel the pain of, oh boy, my husband's in the hospital. Okay, wow, this is going to be challenging. So,
right.
Let's get my wits about me here, and take some breaths and be as skillful as I can in this really difficult situation, rather than suffer. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional.
Right.
And suffering really does come from the mind's relationship to painful experiences. It's like when you hurt your arm, yes, you have all this pain in your arm, but your brain is going, oh my God, now I can't write, or I've got to drive tomorrow. How am I going to be able to drive? Your mind starts panicking, like, oh, will my arm ever work again? It just goes down these rabbit holes, suffering rabbit holes. And that's part of it. It's just going, all right, let's just tend to the pain here. Yeah. Just see what it's like. And, let's be skillful here, but we don't need to catastrophize or future trip.
That's right. The Buddha talked about, the two arrows,
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get arrows all the time, but it's on you if the second arrow comes.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the suffering arrow.
That's right.
Because pain is inevitable.
Yep, exactly.
We live in a world that flip-flops between pleasure and pain, pleasure and pain, pleasure and pain. And it's our reaction to it.
That's right. And we so don't want pain in our lives, right? Mm-hmm. We lean towards the pleasant, and we repel towards the unpleasant. And that's what I love about mindfulness, is it's saying it's all interesting. It's all interesting. Get curious when unpleasant shows up, just like when pleasant shows up, because there's so much to learn from the unpleasant, because often we get hijacked. We feel hijacked by unpleasant feelings and thoughts. But if we just turn towards it, it's really, really liberating.
Yeah. Yeah. Mindfulness is like a tool, right?
That's right.
So now you have this toolbox, and sometimes emotions can get trapped. So, if you deal with it on the spot, it's a much better method than repressing it, and then all of a sudden, you blow like a pressure cooker a year later.
Right. Yeah. And, and I have to say, adults often will do that with kids. They'll see a kid having an uncomfortable emotion, and they become uncomfortable. You can imagine yourself like on a plane, right? You hear some unknown baby screaming 3 aisles back or 3 rows back. And, many of us are like, oh my God, someone fix that, go flight attendant, mom, dad, whoever, caregiver, fix that baby. And because we feel all this uncomfortability coming up and we don't know what to do with it. We can't say anything. We can't do anything. And we just kind of want to lose it. I don't know if that's ever happened to you, but that's happened in the past.
Yeah.
And that's what happens to us when we see kids being uncomfortable. If we see them crying or angry, we tend to mirror them rather than take a breath, find our connection to ourselves and to our own emotional landscape so that we can attend to their disease or discomfort. But we don't often do that. We often just try to go in and swoop in and fix it and say, snap out of it, or, it's just a toy, or why are you crying? Calm down. And what I love to do with kids when I see them in distress is first check in with myself, take those breaths, and then attend to the child's discomfort. And I'll say, boy, it looks like you're having a big emotion, and they'll nod their heads. And I'll say, do you feel hot or cold right now? And they'll say, I feel hot. And do you feel big or little? And often they'll say, I feel little. Or is your heart beating fast or slow? And I kind of do this whole body scan, is your mind busy or still? Do you feel tense or relaxed? Does your heart feel open or closed? And then I'll say, do you think you could wiggle your feet for me? And if they can't wiggle their feet, I actually know that their prefrontal cortex is offline and they really are still in it. So I'll say, let's choose your favorite way to breathe. So they might say, all right, let's do breathing ball breath. And actually, they usually can't talk at that point, but they'll probably put their fingers together and they'll do breathing ball breath. And you just basically open and close your hands to create a ball with every in breath. Or they might do spidey breathing, where you bring your ring finger and your index finger in and out with every breath. And that helps them.
Spider-Man to the rescue.
That's right. Exactly. Superhero. I have this whole thing about superheroes. When we start meditating, I'll say, please find your mindful posture. And so sit up like your favorite superhero with a tall back and a relaxed belly, and just breathe in. And they're so cute. A lot of them will go, when I say, when I start to say the word superhero, they'll say, your favorite superhero. And so they get a kick out of thinking of themselves as superhuman. Because I always refer to the fact that mindfulness is a little like having a superpower, because you're no longer hijacked by every emotion and every thought.
Yes, well put. Now, how about the lion in me?
Well, the lion in me speaks to what we were just talking about a little bit, about naming and taming our inner beast. The book starts off with this little boy in a lunchroom, and a girl behind him accidentally trips him. And he loses his lunch, and he starts getting madder and madder. And you can see it in his shoulders. You can see it in his fists. You can see it on his face. You can see it in his eyebrows. You can see the heat showing up in his cheeks. And basically, it leads you through what the body is experiencing when anger shows up. And then he loses his emotion, he loses himself, and he throws things, and he basically turns into this whirling lion in the lunchroom in his imagination. That's what he sort of imagines after it happens. He's like, oh my gosh, what just happened there? He's kind of shocked. He doesn't know what happened, but he's sort of staring ahead, and a teacher is comforting him. And he realizes that if he can remember to take slow, deep breaths, he's able to be more skillful when anger shows up. So he doesn't feel bad about what he did, or regret what he did, or what he said. And so he learns these practices, mostly breathing, when anger shows its face. However, it also talks about, going for a walk, or talking to an adult, or going to read a book and, in a special place, which actually happens to be Puppy Mind, which is, I think, really cute that he's reading one of my books in the book. It's very meta. And, so there's just, you just think about tools when anger arises. What can we do to be our most skillful? Because of course, we don't want anger to disappear if it's needed. Anger in a dark alley is needed. Anger in a bad marriage perhaps is needed. Anger, when you're worried about your physical safety, might be needed. So there really are no negative or positive emotions. They're just big, uncomfortable emotions that need to be tended to. So that book is basically about him learning to master his most challenging emotion, which is anger. And because of it, he learns how to make friends, how to share, how to, just connect with himself better as well. So that's that's my favorite of all the books. Puppy Mind is a bestseller. The Lion in Me, I think, is just newer, so it hasn't gotten out there into the world. But it really teaches us to look inward when difficult emotions arise.
Yeah, great skills for children. How many children's books have you written?
I've written four. And plus, in this curriculum that I've written, which is about 300 pages long, there's 13 stories in there. And they're from around the world, stories that I found just on the internet. And I turn them into stories that have a mindful quality to them. And they're all rhyming. There's the Tale of Two Wolves. There's the Silver Deer King. There's What Size is Kindness, which is an African folk tale about a rat and a hunter. And just, different stories about gratitude, about compassion, about kindness, about curiosity, about the breath, about looking for the good. One of the games we play with the kids is find the pleasant in the present. And we imagine that we might be in a junkyard, and kids, I'll have them close their eyes if they want, and they can raise their hand when they see something in the junkyard, in this imaginary junkyard, that makes them smile. Right. So it might be a cat, or an old Xbox, or a bike, or an old tire they get to roll around, or the blue sky. It doesn't have to be anything amazing. It can just be something so simple. And, we'll just give them different scenarios, a traffic jam, a crowded school bus, a busy or rainy day, or a snowy day. What can you find in your world that makes you smile? Because, as you know, the negativity bias is really strong, and we can train ourselves to look for the good more and more if we want to. And I think it's a really good skill to have.
Yeah. Well, you just said the key word, training.
Yeah.
Not too long ago, I was talking to someone who is very religious, a Jehovah's Witness.
Mm-hmm.
And she says to me, I'm thinking about taking a mindfulness class. And I thought to myself, well, mindfulness is really becoming mainstream here, because, mindfulness is, it's really a Buddhist idea. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, Gautama the Buddha, you actually used the term mindfulness. This is 2,600 years ago. Is this mainstream mindfulness, is this just Buddhism hidden?
Right. I love that question. And I have two answers to it. One, the short answer is probably yes. But on the other hand, I would say that mindfulness is our birthright. If you think about those cave people that we were talking about, imagine how mindful they needed to be in order to survive, to hunt well, to fish well, to mate well, to find their people, to notice the elements, to notice that there's a storm coming. Imagine how connected with themselves and with the environment they were before they even, Buddha even showed up. So what I love about Buddhism, though, is that it really is just a science of the mind. It's this ability to learn how to notice whatever shows up in the body and the heart and the mind. One of the things I don't like about the term mindfulness is that it's sort of a misnomer, because
Yep.
we really want to be checking in with our body a lot and checking in with our hearts a lot. Sometimes the mind is so busy with thoughts that it's almost like, all right, I'm just going to let you do your thing up there, but I'm going to tend to my tense shoulders and my beating heart and my tight belly, and my knocking knees, and just breathe and be gentle with all the primal sensations that the body is trying to send to me, And so it's an interesting word. I have to say, I'm just not a huge fan of the word mindfulness.
Not either.
Yeah, someone was saying kindfulness is a sweet way to think of it.
My favorite is watchfulness.
Yeah. It's a noticing practice. I like that a lot. So is it watered down? In some ways, perhaps it needs to be, because, we're not all ready to be monks and study this 24. Sometimes we just need little tidbits, little things that we can hook onto. And
I don't think the Buddha gets enough credit.
Yeah.
Because humans, of course, created a religion out of it, right? And then it can't just be one religion. We have to break it off into original, Zen, Tibetan.
Yeah.
Right. We got to have different kinds. Christianity became 20 different kinds.
Yeah.
What this man brought to the world is, arguably the greatest contribution ever.
Yeah. And that he didn't bring any gods into it. I love that about it. It's really just, their life is unreliable, or, life has suffering.
Yep.
I like the word unreliable for some reason, because it is, it's just, darn it, it's just unreliable. We don't always get what we want. And sometimes we get what we want. But, I just love that it's just about looking inward, that watchfulness you're talking about. And there's no one sort of watching us, judging us, shaming us. And that's a pretty cool way to live. It's just, what, I'm going to be kind to myself and others because it feels good.
Yeah. Yeah. He left God out of it. And that's not to say that he didn't believe in God.
Right.
He just kept it out of the practice.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, because in his last sermon, his last sutra, he talks about devas, which are in those in that religion, in that era, that those are basically angels. Or ascended masters, however you want to put it.
I love that. Yeah.
But it's buried. It's buried.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I know some Buddhist traditions did come up with, right, gods and things like that. But I'm no expert on Buddhism. I just really, intuitively really connected with mindfulness. And I really just find it such a valuable life skill for me.
Sure.
One thing I wanted to just mention, I didn't finish talking about my last book, which is The Barefoot King, which is a really sweet story about a young king who stubs his toe and tries to change the world, but winds up learning how to change his mind instead. And it's a beautiful, beautiful book. Shambhala Press out of Boulder published it for me or with me. And I just love it. And it's about, it comes from a teaching of Shanti Deva, who was a Buddhist monk thousands of years ago. And he was sort of, I think they called him like the custodian of the monastery or something. He wasn't thought to be that bright, but some of the other monks said, "Hey, Shantideva, why don't you come and give a talk and in the hall tonight?" And he was like, "Okay." So he goes in and he gives this incredible talk. And at the very end, he levitates out of the hall and is never seen from again. And, I just love that concept that, we all have something to learn from each other if we just notice it. And it's a really sweet story. It's funny. And it comes from the idea that if we cover the whole world in leather, it's a ridiculous idea. But what if we just put leather on our feet? And that way we can protect ourselves from many of the harms of the world. And it is an analogy to mindfulness, is that often we spend our whole lives wishing the world were different than it was so we can be happy. But what if we tend to our own mind, hearts, and bodies first? So therefore we can move through the life with more ease and skill.
And so your background, you have stage experience. You were in the plays and puppets and all that. And so now you're kind of bringing those skills over and you've created what you call mindful arts, right?
Right.
So now you're spreading the message of mindfulness to children.
That's right. Yeah, I learned, about 9 years ago, I went to the Greater Good Science Center to learn about social and emotional learning. And I didn't know what to expect, but Mindful Schools was there, which is an online organization that teaches teachers how to bring mindfulness into the classroom. And they started playing mindful games at this symposium. And I was just so fascinated because these mindful games were actually theater games that I played in college and in my rehearsals, both as an actor and director. And it just, kind of cracked me up in a way because I felt like I had sort of been learning how to be mindful on stage for years and years and years, but I really hadn't thought of how could I bring this to my own life. And it was just this aha moment. So I learned that what I realized was both mindfulness and theater training invite the participants to use their breath to connect with their minds, hearts, and their bodies so that they can be their most skillful. We want to be really listening to each other, 100% on stage. We want to be seeing each other 100%. We don't want to be thinking about the past or future or worried about things we can't control, like what does the reviewer in the audience think, or my mother in the audience think, or what's for dinner after the show. None of that. We just want to keep coming back again and again. And then if our minds wander off, especially on stage, I might go, oh my gosh, I'm thinking about a million things. I can't hear what Kevin's saying right now. Let me come back to Kevin. Okay, Kevin just smiled. Kevin just moved his shoulders, and I do this sort of mind meld with you a little bit. So I'm back in the moment again. But it's an awareness. It's awareness process where you notice when you're not in the moment and you come back. And that is 100% what mindfulness is.
It is.
Yeah. And so it's almost like life training. I think every actor would say to you, like, acting is like life training. I think it's no accident that if you're around theater people, they're very engaged. They might be annoying because they're so, they try to fill the room with their, presence and energy. but they're certainly nowhere else but there. A lot of times you'll look around like a party, let's say, there'll be people sitting on a couch by themselves, nervous, drinking, and they're a million miles away. But often a theater person, especially, maybe not film actors, but theater people, are really, really in the moment and are interested in connecting in some way with what's happening right here, right now.
Yeah. If you're going to be an actor, especially on stage live,
yeah,
you got to be present. Big time.
Yeah.
And I can relate. I used to be a radio and television personality.
Oh, wow.
And when you're live, that's it. I mean, you can't hop on a microphone and start babbling or lose your place. And in radio, it's very time oriented in radio. Or all broadcasting is time oriented. There's a countdown.
Right.
Like, okay, you got 60 seconds to deliver this message.
Right.
And sometimes you got 10 seconds to deliver this message. So you're present.
Right.
And so I can relate to what you're saying. And just like you, I switched careers and I decided to, make a children's book. So I did that, but with health. So
what's the name of it?
Sunlight Sunny.
Cute.
It's a superhero.
Oh, I love that.
What health superhero?
I love it.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I know more. I'll Google it.
Not too popular yet. I created a nonprofit organization around it.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, you partnered with a nonprofit organization.
That's right.
Smart.
That's right.
Smart. I created my own thinking it was going to be easy, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
Because it's still not off the ground because it requires help.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not just solo Kevin. It can't be.
No, you need a board of directors and all that.
A development person, somebody to help you go raise money.
Yeah.
Oh, Lordy. I just didn't. So it's taking years.
Yeah. No, I'm so glad that I went down this road of just figuring out who was already in the schools and how I could work with them to get mindfulness in their programming. And it just was seamless. They were doing tutoring for math and English, literacy. And I said, well, do you mind if I just I already have the teacher. Can I just use you all to get fingerprinted and whatnot and get a badge? And that's how it started. And I was in two classes for 2 kindergarten classes for the first year. And then after that, it just grew and grew. And now we have over 40 volunteers. We hired a program coordinator. People send us money. We don't often even apply for money. I've had 2 grants in the last year that have given us one for $10,000. And then 3 months ago, a family foundation out of Seattle saw us online and sent us $12,000. And
oh, wow.
I know. And it's a beautiful thing. I think people see the value in helping kids with their mental health.
Sure.
Especially these days, we've seen that in the Olympics. Someone dropped out, said that
yes,
her mind was not in the game, and she didn't want to risk her life to sort of entertain us all. And I just thought that was so beautiful that she was skillful enough to know this was not in her best interests, even though the world said, entertain us. And then, of course, the mental health of kids has really been shown a flashlight on because of, wearing masks in school is challenging. Being at home for the last 18 months was really challenging. Having stressed out parents is hard to be around, so it's really been an interesting unfolding in the last 2 years, and perhaps there will be some good out of it.
When does it end?
It never does. It never does. That's what's amazing about this being human, is that there's always something. There's always something. And that's why these skills are so valuable.
Well, I like your saying that life is unreliable.
Yeah,
It's so very true.
right.
It's just this roller coaster ride, up and down and up and down. And if you think you're just always going to be up, it's just not going to happen
No, no.
unless you become an enlightened master, which,
Right. But yeah, but then do you not get to grieve? I find, I lost my dog about 6 months ago, and
mm,
I just was so sad, and I just thought, you know what, this is how much I know how to love and how I can love, and I wouldn't want that to go away. I don't, if enlightened master means if someone dies that I'm like, oh well, good luck.
they'll
I
be
don't.
back.
Yeah, yeah,
They'll be
right.
back in the next life.
Exactly. I don't know if I want to be there. I'd rather, like I said, be skillful when big emotions show up, and just tend to myself, and practice good self-care when I'm going through a big emotional experience. Because I may have said this already, but I really believe that there are no negative emotions, that there's just uncomfortable, big, difficult emotions, but negative or positive, to me, have no value.
About 10 years ago, you lost your mother.
Yeah, yeah.
And how did you deal with that?
Whew. Yeah, that was pretty beautiful and stark. But I got to my boss, bless his soul and heart, he's still alive. He allowed me to take a sabbatical for 7 weeks and care for my mom. So I was with her. My sister was with her. My mom had a really good friend named Billy who tended to her as well. So we all lived in the same house together up in the mountains, and we had a healthcare provider come in. And so it was really this incredible gift to be with her. And then oddly, when she passed, certainly, missed her and cried and whatnot, but there was some really, I don't think your show is that woo-woo, but there was some really weird things that happened as soon as she passed. And still to this day, things show up and I think, oh, this is my mom saying hi. Just like one kind of ghost story thing is we have a cuckoo clock, or a grandfather clock, up on the wall where she passed, and it's our cabin that we've had since the 70s. And below the grandfather clock is a bunch of stuff that she valued while she was passing, little teddy bear and things like that, a scarf that she liked to wear around her neck. But on the grandfather clock, the pendulum was a picture of my mother that I had taken. And it was a very ethereal picture. It was really beautiful. And one day I'm cleaning in there a couple of weeks after she passed, and I hear this music, and I'm like, music? Who has the radio on, or whatever it is, at 11 in the morning? So I look over at the radio, which we actually never use, and that's off. It's not working. And then I look over at the grandfather clock, and there is the pendulum going back and forth just ever so slightly with my mom's picture on it. And the clock is trying to chime. And this thing we haven't used in 20 years, maybe 25, maybe 30. We hated it actually because it was one of those clocks that chimed every 15 minutes. So it was just so annoying. So we actually kind of hid the key. But on this particular day, with my mother's picture on the chime, it started to move back and forth and was sort of playing this music. It wasn't, gonging or anything. And so so anyway, so I didn't really talk about my emotions around my mom's passing, but there was just this beauty to it and this sort of otherworldliness to it. And of course I miss her, but I think about her all the time, and I really do feel like she's with me. So I guess I'm not that Buddhist, because I don't know if Buddhists think of, the spirit in that way, but it's certainly changed my relationship to the departed when my mom passed. Because I've had lots of actually very close friends pass and loved ones pass, and I never had that spiritual experience. Wasn't really anticipating it with my mom. It just, I've had 7 weeks to be with her and massage her feet and, and get her that, ice cream that she liked, at night. And so there wasn't this feeling of, oh my gosh, 1 minute more, 1 minute more. I really just felt like, we had just this lovely relationship. So I often wonder, well, is this just, a son grieving their parent? And it might be part of that, but it really didn't feel like that, and continues not to feel like that.
So you had the opportunity to be in service to your mom in her last weeks.
Yeah.
That's
it was
cool.
really lovely.
That's cool. Yeah. And what a blessing for her.
Yeah.
How many people get that opportunity?
That's right. No, she was a lovely human being. And, she just had so many friends and loved ones, and she was kind of like Lucille Ball in a way. She just always was making people laugh, and she was very physical with her comedy. I don't know if I said this, but she was deaf, so she used, her hands a lot and her body a lot to convey what she was thinking or saying. And so she was quite a comedian.
Completely deaf?
Completely deaf. Yeah.
Her whole life.
Whole life. Yeah. She was born deaf. My father was deaf. He lost his hearing when he was 16. And so it was really interesting growing up with deaf parents, because again, I feel like that taught me some mindfulness too, because you have to really be focused on someone's face when you're talking with them. To a deaf person, they have to be able to read your lips or, see your hands move. You can't be looking away. I remember my mom always used to kind of gently grab my chin and pull me towards her face a little bit, so she knew that I was hearing her, because in her head, if I wasn't, if I was looking down at a comic or something or watching television, she didn't believe that I was hearing her. So she would take my chin and make sure that I was watching her mouth move. So that was a real mindfulness practice for me too, is to just really look at someone in the eyes when they're speaking, which often isn't the case with human beings.
Sure.
So yeah. So that,
and so it sounds like she completely, surrendered to her disability and made a nice life for herself.
Yeah, she really did. She traveled on her own sometimes to Europe quite a bit, to other countries besides Europe quite a bit. She was kind of fearless. And she died when she was 75. And so, yeah, she's a pretty remarkable woman. I kind of feel like one day I'll kind of be like her when I grow up. But just really was fearless and would talk to anyone. She was deaf, so she had an unusual speech pattern, but she would just go up to a stranger and say, look, I'm deaf, but I need to get to, this building or wherever. Can you help me? And often people would help her. And, she just, you hear people say that, they never met a stranger. Well, that was my mom. She just never met a stranger and always looked for the good. She was just always upbeat, and never saw her depressed. Was just a real lover of life.
Well, I think there's a lesson there, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
because a lot of people fall into the hole of their limitations
Mm.
and they let it, bring them down and it affects their life.
Yeah. And my mom would loved being deaf. My father actually didn't like being deaf, but my mother loved being deaf. She felt like, especially, she wore hearing aids periodically, not that much as she got older because it just was a pain, but she would love to turn off her hearing aids at night. And she's like, yes, I don't have to hear anything. I just hear silence. Because, think about it. We hear so many different sounds
Oh, yeah.
and our brain is used to it. But imagine if at a party, let's say, okay, I got to put in my hearing aid so I can really hear people. Imagine what your brain is having to deal with when you hear, a dish breaking in the kitchen or someone laughing to your right. That's a lot of information that you can't quite make out with a hearing aid. Must have been a little maddening in a way to have all these sounds that you couldn't quite make out, but we're supposed to.
Right. So, Andrew, where can someone find you and come say hello?
Sure. Go to Andrew J. Nance, NANCE.com, or go to mindfulartssf.org and check out what we do in the schools. We're always looking for volunteers to go into the schools. If you're in San Francisco, we see over 1,000 kids a week. And we've actually got some requests from New Jersey and Sacramento and Los Angeles to start programs like what I'm doing. And unfortunately, we don't have the bandwidth to do that. But what's really easy to do is just try to find one teacher who's willing to do a program with you and try it for 3 or 4 classes and see if that hooks them enough to ask other teachers in the school to bring the programming into their classroom. So yeah, it's a pretty easy program to start, and you just start small.
Right on. Well, I love what you're doing, man.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for joining me today.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening to Inner Peace with Dr. Reese. If this episode opened your heart, feel free to share on social media and tell your loved ones. Also, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, may peace be with you.